A massive new release of documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein has reopened a chapter that many people believed was sealed for good, buried under plea deals, sealed filings, and years of institutional reluctance. This time, however, the sheer volume of material changes the gravity of the moment. Tens of thousands of pages from Epstein's estate are now public, offering an unusually intimate look into how he thought, how he communicated, and how he continued to track power long after his criminal exposure. These documents do not feel random or incomplete. They read like the private record of a man who believed he still mattered, still influenced outcomes, and still understood how elite systems truly function. And welcome to Political Plot, where we cut through the noise to reveal the power plays shaping American politics. Today we're diving into how newly released Jeffrey Epstein documents expose the hidden mechanics of power, showing how proximity, silence, and private communication can shape political narratives long after public ties are supposedly cut. It's not about proven crimes, but about influence, perception, and how elite systems protect themselves when scrutiny gets too close. Before examining what these materials suggest, it is necessary to establish a clear boundary. Donald Trump has not been charged with any crime connected to Jeffrey Epstein. No court has ruled that he engaged in criminal conduct related to Epstein's trafficking operation. That distinction is critical and should not be blurred. At the same time, legal innocence does not erase the relevance of association, proximity, or private communication. What these documents show is that Epstein repeatedly referenced Trump in his private correspondence, often with strategic intent and sustained attention, particularly during Trump's transition from celebrity figure to political power broker. One of the most striking patterns to emerge early is fixation. Epstein appears intensely focused on Trump's public trajectory, reputation, and vulnerabilities. In communications with Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein makes cryptic remarks about Trump's absence from law enforcement scrutiny, suggesting that silence itself carried meaning. These comments are not framed as idle curiosity, they imply calculation. Maxwell's responses do not reject or minimize these observations. Instead, they suggest engagement, reinforcing the idea that Trump remained an active subject of analysis within Epstein's inner circle. As the documents progress, this fixation deepens. In correspondence with journalist Michael Wolff, Epstein claims that Trump was aware of young women circulating within Epstein's world and had privately urged Maxwell to restrain certain activities. These claims are not corroborated within the documents themselves and must be treated cautiously. However, what stands out is Epstein's tone. He expresses these assertions with confidence, as though he believed they would not surprise the person reading them. This suggests that Epstein viewed such knowledge as common currency among those he considered insiders. The conversation becomes more revealing when it turns toward Trump's political ambitions. Epstein and Wolff exchange thoughts on how Trump might respond if confronted about Epstein during the presidential campaign. Epstein asks how an answer could be shaped. Wolff suggests that denial could later become leverage, either to undermine Trump or to bind him into obligation. This is not gossip. It is strategic thinking, treating truth, denial, and silence as instruments that could be deployed depending on future circumstances. The response in Congress was swift and unusually unified. Members from both parties demanded transparency, arguing that partial disclosures and prolonged secrecy had served institutions rather than justice. A discharge petition gained enough signatures to force a vote compelling the Justice Department to release Epstein-related materials. Survivors were present in the gallery as lawmakers spoke, a visible reminder that this debate is not abstract. It is rooted in real harm, prolonged silence, and decades of unanswered questions. As scrutiny intensified, it became clear that Trump was only one element of a much broader network. The documents show Epstein corresponding with figures across politics, media, academia, and culture. He comments frequently on how scandals unfold, noting patterns in who faces consequences and who remains insulated. Epstein appears acutely aware of double standards, observing that power often absorbs accusations, while lesser figures collapse under similar weight. This perspective reinforces the idea that Epstein saw himself not merely as a criminal defendant, but as an observer of elite immunity. The White House has responded by dismissing the document release as politically motivated and legally insignificant, emphasizing that private emails do not establish wrongdoing. From a strictly legal perspective, that argument carries weight, but politics and public trust do not operate solely on courtroom standards. Culturally and institutionally, the release has reopened unresolved questions about proximity, silence, and accountability. Epstein's name is once again connected not only to horrific crimes, but to the mechanisms that allowed him to retain influence for so long. That is why this story refuses to fade. It is not only about what Epstein did, it is about who continued engaging with him, listening to him, and treating him as a source of insight long after his conduct was exposed. The documents do not deliver verdicts or final conclusions. What they provide is a clearer picture of how power observes itself, shields itself, and delays reckoning when exposure threatens stability. And this is only the beginning. The material released so far suggests that Epstein's communications reach deep into multiple centers of influence. If these pages are any indication, the remaining files may complicate the narrative even further. The central question is no longer whether the story will continue, but how much of it institutions are willing to confront now that silence is increasingly difficult to maintain. What becomes increasingly clear as these documents are read in sequence is that Epstein viewed information itself as power. He did not merely collect names or anecdotes. He tracked reactions, hesitations, contradictions, and moments of weakness. He paid attention to who panicked when questioned, who laughed things off, who avoided follow-ups, and who tried to change the subject. In that sense, Epstein operated less like a socialite and more like an archivist of human behavior at the top of the hierarchy. That mindset helps explain why his communications feel less emotional and more analytical, even when discussing subjects that should have provoked outrage or fear. This also reframes the repeated references to Trump. Epstein does not write like a man reminiscing about an old acquaintance. He writes like someone conducting a long-term assessment. He watches Trump's public statements, campaign strategy, and media treatment, comparing how institutions respond to Trump versus others accused of lesser offenses. The implication is subtle but persistent. Epstein seems fascinated by Trump's apparent immunity to norms that destroy other public figures. That fascination is not admiration, it is study. Another theme that emerges is Epstein's confidence in the fragility of public memory. He appears to believe that time, distraction, and narrative fatigue can neutralize almost any scandal. In several communications, he alludes to waiting things out, to letting outrage burn itself out while attention shifts elsewhere. This belief mirrors broader institutional behavior, where delay often functions as a form of defense. The documents suggest Epstein understood this deeply and structured his expectations around it. At the same time, there is a notable absence of remorse in these materials. Epstein rarely expresses concern for victims, consequences, or moral reckoning. His focus remains on perception, leverage, and survival within elite spaces. This absence is itself revealing. It underscores why the document release has resonated so strongly with survivors and advocates. The contrast between lived trauma and detached calculation could not be sharper. As lawmakers debate transparency, these documents serve as a reminder that secrecy does not merely protect reputations, it shapes behavior. When individuals believe their communications will never surface, they speak differently, plan differently, and take risks they otherwise would not. The release of Epstein's private correspondence does not only illuminate his actions, it exposes the environment that allowed him to operate with confidence long after exposure should have ended his influence. Ultimately, this chapter is not about proving a single allegation or assigning guilt through implication. It is about understanding how power communicates when it believes it is unseen. Epstein's emails offer a rare glimpse into that world, one where strategy replaces accountability and proximity substitutes for consequence. Whether institutions choose to confront that reality remains uncertain, but the documents have already ensured one thing: the silence that once protected this network is no longer intact.